Hi and welcome. My name is Janice Musselman and I'm here with Musselman Home Inspections and Just Maintenance. And we like to do investor spotlights on our channels because we're investors ourselves and we always find it really interesting to talk to others in the business who are doing investing and just better understand how they do it, how they're working it. And so we can learn from each other. And we like to offer free advice. I know there's a lot of paid programs out there, but we figure why not just get as much information for free, especially for people who like to offer it. So we're here with Seth Bryan today from Atlas Holdings Group.
Hi.
And Seth, we're just going to have a great conversation about how you're doing things and how you started it. So I think if you can kick off, maybe talk about what are you doing? So is this your side hustle? Is this your full-time gig? Or what are you doing just work-wise in general?
Yeah, so it's forming into more of a full-time job. I basically do real estate investing. I do buy and holds mostly, and it's transitioning more, like I said, into a full-time job. But on the side, I do landscaping and construction for a family company, and then for my wife's wedding venue as well.
Okay.
So,
how did you get into real estate investing?
so my dad, he bought a property back late 2000s. So I've been watching him do that. He was a contractor, so he kind of had that like unfair advantage is what I call it. Being a contractor, so he got a property, put tenants in, built up some equity, bought another one, and this kind of like did a slow trickle. So I've been watching him for years, and I always knew I was going to get into real estate, but it was one of those like every year it's kind of like, oh, I will get into real estate, or maybe next year, or maybe when I save up more money. But it's always like one of those things that you're never going to have the time.
Yep.
You might not have the money. So it's always like trying to overcome those oppositions that you're facing. So I always looked up to him because as a landscaper, he was able to, cut his own lawns, for apartments and stuff like that. As a contractor, he was able to, take care of stuff that needs to be fixed, or just, took his contractors that he knew, liked, and trusted to go and do the work for him. So I really paid attention to him over the years, and just really was impressed how he was able to basically do landscaping and construction full time. That was his business. And then in between lawns, deal with tenants, or in between lawns, deal with, problems that were arising at the apartment. So it was one of those things that I think I appreciated the most about him. He's basically an entrepreneur. So he does the landscaping and the construction. He raises pigs on the side. So he basically has, like 7 different things that he's doing. But it wasn't like he's devoted, specific time. It was always just like, we're just going to sprinkle this in amongst the chaos. Yeah. So, he would basically wait for tenants to move out to update units, and he would do this and he would do that. And it was one of those things that it never was like a full-time thing. It was just like, okay, he might set aside a day during the week of, okay, we're going to go and renovate this property. But it was never like the forefront. It was always like, okay, and I just learned that was just like groundbreaking to me, that it never had to be something full-time. Like you can do this and run a full-time. You can do it as a, someone in the office, or someone in a corporate, or even a teacher. I remember growing up, a teacher would fix houses in the summer, and that was just like, he just would line up a house at the end of the school year and work on it over the summer, and it was just like his gig. So, I mean, like I said, the biggest thing I took away from my dad is being able to just fit that in the niches, and I feel like I've done that really well, and also take advantage of the relationships that I've built with contractors. Another thing is, like, as a landscaper, you pay attention to stuff like long grass. You pay attention to different things that the property might need. And so, like, I even picked up a property outside in Percy. Literally, I just noticed it was vacant from high grass, and just knowing, okay, this property is not being lived in. And it was like, and I drove by it probably 100 times.
Well,
and
that's what I was going to ask you, like, how you're getting into them. So your dad got into them in 2000. And then when did you actually like take that leap in yourself and how are you acquiring and finding? Like, it's really interesting to me that you're saying, you're like, hey, I'm looking for high grass and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
So what's your strategy?
So my strategy, actually, I was thinking about this going into this interview. My strategy is really more so of like a ready, fire, aim. So just getting into real estate, basically, it's funny, I know a lot of people that you know in real estate are fans of Bigger Pockets, have listened to their podcasts and have heard that thrown around. And I was like hardcore into their podcasts. And so about 4 years ago, 2019, I was listening to their podcasts, and one of the main guys, Brandon Turner, he started doing like a 90-day challenge. And he told the story of like, he bought a property for his daughter when she was 2 weeks old, and I was like, that's so cool. And then he set it up for like a 15-year mortgage, so that it would, or 18-year mortgage, so that when she was 18, it would be paid off. Yep. And at that time, we had 3 kids, and my oldest was 3, and I was like doing the math of like a 15-year mortgage. I was like, okay, I still have time. I can still do this.
Yep.
So I kind of like set myself up, and I kind of like joined like a group, like a 90-day challenge Facebook group. And we all just like kind of struggled through that thing. And so I just kind of set that deadline, looked at houses in the area, and like at the price point I was looking at, I was getting, I was in like the 130, 150 range. And I would go out with my realtor, and he's like pointing to a guy, and he's like, yeah, that guy, he could buy this in cash, and this person can, outbid you, and this and that. And it was kind of like, I was trying to figure out how I was going to get my first property. So I kept looking, and I was like bound and determined to find a property in that price range, because I felt like that's what we could afford. And I was just really like, just hell-bent on finding that first property. So I ended up finding one on auction.com. So that was like a whole whirlwind, like setting up an LLC, winning the bid. And this first property was in Sellersville, and it was only like 10 minutes from my house. And
when you went on auction.com, because we just bought our first one on auction.com
as
well. Yeah.
Oh,
so
awesome.
It's super interesting to me. Was your property occupied, or was it was occupied?
Yeah.
Walk me through that, because ours was unoccupied. So for us, we drove by it. We knew we weren't going to have any problem getting someone out, right? Because it was vacant. So our biggest challenge was that we couldn't see it, of course.
Yeah.
So how did that work, just going through?
That was a nightmare. It was awful. No, so I mean, like I said, getting the property was like, just felt like an endeavor.
Yep.
I set up my LLC, and I literally got my EIN number like the day it was due for my bid and for my lender.
Yep.
And like, it just felt like it took everything just to get the property. So then I got the property, I bought it, a huge ordeal. And then I waited till I got the deed from my title company, and then I took the deed and I went and I met the guy. And I brought my brother.
You met the person in the house?
Yeah, the person in the house who'd been foreclosed on.
Okay.
And probably like one of the worst things to do is to meet them, because I felt like, here I am showing him the deed, I'm the new owner, and I was trying to be nice. And then he was like talking about signing a lease with me, and I'm thinking, why would I sign a lease with you when you just lost your house to the bank? Like,
right.
If you can't pay them, well, you can't pay me. So it was this huge ordeal, and it was like, it just got ugly. And I won't go into the whole scenario, but it was like, basically, he eventually like moved out, and his sons were living there, and then they brought friends that they met from jail. It was just like, literally just the worst.
So did you start a process with the court right away?
Yeah. So what's interesting, a lot of people, when you have a tenant that's not paying, that's it's just a simple like eviction.
Right.
But with this, it's actually an ejectment, and you go through a different process, and it takes a lot longer actually, which is so bizarre to me, because when a tenant's there, you can get them out in like less than 90 days, very easily. But with an ejectment, there's so much more complications. And So I started working with an attorney from my church, and it was awful because I just didn't think it was going to end. I like filed something the first time under my name when I should have filed under my LLC.
And you have to go back.
So then I go back, so I'm wasting time. And then they were like able to I had a little chink in my armor because I filed under my name, and they were able to buy themselves more time. So it was I ended up buying the property June, and then I didn't get them out till November.
Okay.
And it was a long and terrible process, but it was one of those I wanted a property in that area.
Yep, and that's what you could afford.
That's what I could afford. I just had the vision of okay, I'm going to buy this property. I'm going to get great tenants in it. And to me, it was just buying the property was just the start. Getting the guy out was just the start. Eventually we got him out with cash for keys. So basically I offered that in the very beginning, and the guy just said no. But then he realized he's going to pay for attorney fees, he's going to do this and that. And the longer we put an escalation clause, really it's more of a de-escalation. The longer he stays, the less money he gets.
Okay.
So we were able to finally get him out. And then it's then I'm trying to get in my first rehab. That was just just interesting in of itself. So it was just
So did you actually go to court, or did you get them out before you had any actual court?
We never
proceedings?
went to court. No.
Okay, so no arbitration.
No.
You literally gave them cash for keys.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know when because I'm always curious, if you had to go through court and you didn't do cash for keys, how long would it actually have taken?
So they say it probably could have taken it could take up to 90 days, if not longer. So it's a 3-month minimum,
okay.
And it could take up to 6 months. It all depends on if they're able to, how able they are to fight with a lawyer.
Yep.
And typically in that situation, I just found in this circumstance, they just lost their house. So it's they're not going to have a litany of funds
right.
to fight.
Yep.
There are, I'm not going to use a term, but there are some attorneys that basically do flat fees for that, and they just end up getting money in the back end. So
interesting. No, that's great to know because, I think as an investor in general too, John and I are very thrifty with the houses that we choose to buy, and we're very patient too because we have a budget, we have an ROI that we want to make, and so we don't waver on that.
Yeah.
And we don't get emotional about houses that we're buying. And I've looked at auction.com for years, and our first one that we bought was back in 2021.
Okay.
But I have been nervous about doing the occupied status homes because I haven't spent the time, and honestly, I haven't met anyone who's gone through that process with occupied status and how it worked. And so that's actually not too bad. I've gone through an eviction that was really messy.
Oh, yeah.
And that took months. So if you do get a house for under market and you get a good deal, and you've got a cash flow loss for maybe 6 months, that's not too bad.
Yeah.
It could be worse.
Yeah, like I said, I made a number of mistakes with that property. Going into it, I didn't have the reserves that I should have had, carrying, like you said, carrying the mortgage.
Yep.
I bought it with a hard money lender. It was one of those things that I was able to find a lender. The first 3 months, I didn't have to make a payment, which was basically a godsend because then I had to worry about so I didn't have to pay them. They pushed those payment. They kind of make money in the back end. Yeah, so it worked out really well. But it's one of those things that it's tough finding an off-market property. It's tough buying an auction property. It's pick your tough.
Yep.
It's tough not losing your house. It's there's so many things that you can worry about. There's so many things that problems that you can be frozen about. But it's to me, I wish I had more reserves going into it. I wish I knew how much longer it was going to take. And then I also wish I just realized that, you know, this was just going to be like a stepping stone. You know, it was one of those things that, again, like I probably never should have met the guy. I probably should have just dropped the letter.
Let someone else handle it. Yeah,
let someone else handle it, because you were talking about getting emotional and all that. It just was like, it gets ugly very, very quickly. So
we made our first mistake with the one I was telling you about, our townhome that was our personal residence. And then I didn't want to sell it because we were going to lose our shirt on it.
Yeah.
So we decided to rent it. And that was our first tenant we've ever had.
Okay.
And, you know, single mom situation. So I think a lot of lessons that we learned too, where we should have had more firm boundaries. But because it was our first, we didn't. And, you know, you get into that humanity of the situation and you want to do what you can. But at the end of the day, you know, I think as landlords, once you go through that, you realize like, okay, this isn't a nonprofit, right? Like this is a business also. And so while you want to be gracious and also, you know, be there for your tenant, there's a point where you have to set that boundary to say like, I'm sorry, like this just isn't working. So those are tough lessons that you have to learn, and you hate to see it too. You know, you want everyone to be able to just like live there happy and pay, and if they can't pay, to leave on their own. You know, you hate to have to evict someone. So
it's hard.
Yeah, it's really hard. So all of yours have been buy and hold.
Yeah. So since then, so basically, I bought that first one, and it was a townhome in Sellersville. I door knocked 2 doors down and bought one for cheaper.
So you door knocked.
I door knocked that one.
Love this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I door knocked. Turns out the guy, my grandma went to church with him, so I was able to make a connection. He was going through a divorce, got connected with the wife who was going to get the house in the settlement.
Okay.
Then, long story short, it looked like the realtor we were working with, her realtor was going to buy it. So then I was like, that stinks. So then that all fell through in a good way. And then I ended up purchasing it for cheaper. I didn't have to kick anyone out. It was it's the end unit, so it was bigger. So that the ARV was larger. I kind of like took what I learned doing the renovations in the first property and did that again. Like with these ones, they have a third floor that were unfinished.
Okay.
Typically, like when they built the house, the third floor was just like an attic. And the one I bought was finished, and I'm like looking at it, and we were able to like add a full bath up on the third floor and make it like a master suite. So we just did that kind of like second verse, same as the first with the next one, and you know, knew what we were doing, and I was just like, okay. And there's like 10 homes in this row, and I was like, oh man, I was like, at the time I had like, we had our fourth, and I was like, I could buy 4. I was like, the ARV at the time was like 250 to 300, and I was like, in 30 years, like I was doing the math of like 4 times 300. I was like, this is great. Like, and
you're
then
thinking college.
Yeah, like, I'm thinking college. I'm thinking they'll all be in the same row. And it was great. But then we ended up finding a 4-unit closer to our house in Percy. Same thing, drove by, called the guy, made a great connection with him. And we met, and it was one of those things that was like, and both the second row home I bought in Sellersville and the 4-unit in Percy was during COVID at 2020. So everyone's like trying to figure out how long that hot market was going to last and when the bottom was going to fall out. So I feel like I was able to really get some good deals in that scenario. And one of the things, you know, as a landscaper, so I'm listening to podcasts, I'm listening to books all the time, and going into buying the 4-unit, I listened to Never Split the Difference. I don't know if you read that book, Chris Voss. He was an FBI negotiator. So he took what he learned as an FBI negotiator. And when you negotiate a hostage situation, you know, the point is like you can't just, you know, cut the person in half and say you get this half and I get so they never split the difference. And so he took those tactics and they put them in the business. And it was just the stuff that he brings up in this book is just like awesome when you're trying to negotiate properties. And I've never used a realtor to buy any of these properties. None of them were on the market. You know, the one realtor that I dealt with the second property, you know, she transacted it, so we paid her a flat fee or whatever. So I met with this guy for the 4-unit, and I listened to the book twice while I was mowing. and I brought all the stuff. I took notes and everything, and like basically, the book cost me like $20 on Audible, and I got paid probably $200 mowing while listening to that book. So I made money listening to that book, and then I took all the strategies I learned, and basically like he was at 250 and I was at 200, and he was like, okay, let's meet in the middle at 225, and I was like, no, like I remember what I learned in the book.
Yeah.
And so they talk about setting a hard anchor.
Okay.
And I told him no, like I was at 180 and I came up to 200. And he was like trying to retire and move to Hawaii and all this other stuff, and so he came down to 200. So like just listening to that book, I mean it saved me the 50,000 based off how far he came down. But in the negotiations, like just listening to that book, it saved myself 25,000.
That's awesome. And I'll have to get that book.
Yeah, it's a great book. And
50 a unit for Percocet is amazing.
Yeah, I mean so we bought it for 200, and it took about 200 to fix it up.
To get it up.
Yeah. The ARV was the appraised value was 625. It's a very large lot, like right in Percocet and everything. So, I mean, it's like, so then we kind of not abandoned ship, but we couldn't find any more deals in that row home. We're still, trying to work our way into getting more of that. So since then, it was just like word of mouth. I bought 2 from wholesalers in the area. I do have 1 flip I'm doing in East Greenville. But like I said, I'm just trying to like trickle that in to my full-time job, doing the landscaping and all that.
What do you like about the flip versus the buy and hold? Or when do you decide to pepper those in?
So the flip, when I'm trying to do with apartments, I'm trying to keep them like 20 minutes from my house. I think the furthest one, we just got a 4-unit in Green Lane. That's like 22 minutes. So I'm not gonna cry for 2 minutes.
Right.
And I'm not gonna pass up on a deal for 2 minutes.
Nope.
The flip was about 35 minutes.
Okay.
With that one, it's similar to the house we have. It's a Cape Cod. I could keep it as a rental, but one of the things that I'm really trying to learn from the very beginning is like building up reserves. We've done really well doing cash out refinances with all of them, but it's still money that you owe back at the end of the day.
Right.
So I just kept trying to figure out, okay, how do I make money? And it was always so hard when I would get a deal. I have a friend, he's always like, oh, like you could make this much on this flip. And I'm like, well, after I pay taxes, it's like, sure, I make out that money, but then I don't have any cash flow.
Right.
And then I also have to go and find another property to replace that. And so it was always funny because like for every kid we had, I'm trying to buy a property, but then I'm forgetting all the diapers and all the stuff that each kid involves.
What, you mean your budget increases at home?
Yeah, our budget increases at home, but then I'm also forgetting for every property, it's 1 more tenant.
Yeah.
It's 3 or 4 more toilets.
Yeah.
It's just that much more that you have to worry about. And what I kept realizing is like at some point, I do just need to like make money. Like it's great doing the cash out refinances because it's they call it free money, but it still has to be paid back at some point.
Right.
It's still on your debt to income ratio and all that kind of stuff. So what I'm trying to do is sprinkle in the flips to basically fund
another purchase for a buy and hold.
Yeah.
I was going to say, so your recent buy and holds, I mean, are you still using hard money, or are you mostly trying to build that reserve through cash out refinance and then flips?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So actually what happened is our first deal we did the hard money, and then another book I read, I actually met the guy, he's a Bigger Pockets contributor, Raising Private Capital.
Okay.
I met Matt Faircloth. He actually lives in Bucks County. I read his book and ended up getting a private lender who I'd known for a number of years, and I just knew his situation. And I just knew kind of like, he had funds available, so I had a deal, and it was always like, you're always in one camp. It's either you have the funds and you can't find the deal, or you have the deal and you can't find the funds. So I was able to work with him on that first deal. Then I did the 4-unit in Percocet with him. So I've done like 3 more deals with him.
Okay.
And it's just been a great relationship because I call it mailbox money for him. You know, he doesn't have to swing a hammer. He doesn't have to worry about this and that.
Yep.
And it's basically like, with the hard money, they do an appraisal, they do this, they have certain criteria, which is fine. They have to, you know, be safe about it. But with my lender, it's like, here's the address, here's the price, and here's the date I have to close.
Right.
And it's just super simple.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And, you know, we have a great relationship, and I wouldn't be where I am without him. But it's also like, and no offense to him, like, there's so many other people that, like, if he ended up wanting to do his other stuff or didn't want to lend anymore, like, it's insane how, like I said, people want deals.
Right.
So when you bring a deal to the table, everyone's like raising their hand, like, oh, you know, I'll lend on that.
Yeah.
So we've done that. We've done the private lending for everyone since then. We haven't done any hard money lenders.
Okay.
So
you're like encouraging me because we've talked about doing private lending or doing like capital raise, but we've been working on 2 properties that like need to get done.
Sure. Oh yeah.
But it's definitely been a thought for us because even just financing, you know, whether it's easy or hard to get financing, it's still a pain.
Yeah.
You know, some of the lenders for us, like it's been easy, very little paperwork. Other lenders, you know, you're like birthing a baby for them. And it's just, it could be so much simpler when you find someone who understands how you're doing business and understands, you know, the rate of return they're going to get and is really comfortable with real estate investing. It could be really simple.
Yeah.
So, and that's what, like, I think banks have started to understand the process more.
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
But it's still overcomplicated, for sure.
Yeah. And that's why it's, you know, like I said, the simplicity with this lender, and I know several other people that, you know, are interested in stuff like that, but it's just, it's almost like revolutionary when you think about it for both sides. Like, for them to be able to get that return that they're not going to get at the bank, they don't, you know, they have their own job or they have their own things that they need to worry about, and this is just another way for them to invest in real estate. Obviously, there's risks involved.
Yeah.
You know, no matter what.
I was blown away when I found, and it wasn't a hard money lender, it was in between. And it was one of the conversations I had where he was like, I don't care about your W-2. And I'm like, wait, you're not hard money and you don't care about my W-2? He's like, nope. And it was the first time it was through constructive loans.
Okay.
That I was just like, wow, like this is finally someone who is like, your W-2 isn't necessarily giving me any confidence in your rental.
Yeah.
And your ability to have good rentals, good return on assets, being a good landlord, right? Like proving that you can do it. So that was really insightful to me, like when we finally figured out, okay, there's other ways to go about buying homes. Because we've historically done the cash out refi so that we can continue to buy in cash.
Yeah.
And then just do our own thing for financing as it becomes available. But we've definitely been trying to figure out, like we've done all singles so far.
Okay.
So we haven't done multi-units.
Okay.
It's something that I've started to be more interested in just because of location and proximity. Like we have the same thing. We won't go anywhere more than 30 minutes.
Okay.
Because we need to be able to make the rounds for maintenance.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a maintenance company, so we want it to be easy. And we don't feel comfortable like not being able to drive by our homes.
I know.
There's just something where I know some people will like just invest in other states and, you know, let's just buy a property over in Texas and there's, you know, great value, but I can't do it.
Yeah.
I need to have my eyes on it.
No, and before I bought, we recently bought the Green Lane 4-unit and then a duplex in Souderton. And before that, it was like I could go from Quakertown, drive through Sellersville, and then drive through Percy in like a 20-minute drive. I'm driving by all of them. And yeah, it's great to be able to kind of have your eyes on everything.
Yeah.
So.
I was just thinking about your strategy long term. So I know we talked about, you keep mentioning kids. So I know you guys are on child number 6.
Yeah.
But what's your ultimate goal? Do you have a freedom number? Or like, how are you looking at this from a long-term strategic perspective?
Yeah, so what's interesting, just the way it kind of broke down as we were buying them. So every girl has a row home, like a twin, and every boy has a multi-unit. And it's just funny, the way I was looking at it over the last month or so since we picked them up is like the girls, like they'll have girlfriends, they can all like, you know, rent rooms together and, you know, have have their houses, and the two girls are actually next to each other, and the boys have the multi-units, and they'll be able to like manage them themselves. It's similar to the girls, but it'll be a different style and everything. So the ultimate goal, I mean, right now I'm at 15 units. I would love to get another 15. The ones that I've bought for each kid, it's kind of like, do they want to live here? They want to live there? They want to trade this property for another?
Yeah, they'll be swapping, once they turn 18. They'll be like, Dad, okay, this is the one we really want.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that'll take a lot, but yeah, that's fine. That would be an awesome, like, whatever. Like, they're not going to hurt my feelings about that.
Yep.
So, I mean, a freedom number, I mean, I was trying to just replace my income.
Yeah.
And, like, obviously for every kid, it's like that number goes up. For every kid, it's like I'm trying to, do this or that or the other thing. And so I don't really have a number as far as, like, what I'm trying to make each month. I'm just trying to, like, get up to about 30 units.
And still make it manageable for you to maintain and to run.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, so I've been getting tenants through apartments.com. I vet them myself. And I've had, I feel like a 85, 90% hit rate. I haven't had any major issues, or definitely some conversations I've had to have here and there, but I've been able to just kind of manage myself, and I feel like right now at 15, it's like, the tenants I have right now are very low key.
Yeah.
Take care of the property. A lot of times if it's a single family, they're mowing the grass, they're taking care of things themselves. It's like
they're treating it like it was their own home.
That's in my lease, so it's like, and it's like funny as a landscaper. It's like, sure, I have an unfair advantage to mow these properties, and I do mow a couple of them, but it's also like, the last thing I want to do is like buy a property and now I have another job. It's almost like I don't mind doing it if I need to, or if it's convenient. Like, we'll mow one of my properties when we do some of our lawns for my dad.
Yeah.
And so it's just one of those things. I'm trying to like keep them low key so that I can, like, right now it's like I say, I trickle it in.
Yep. One I think it's different if it's like, I see multi-unit more of, okay, as a landlord, I may be mowing the lawn, because it's like, well, which tenant is mowing the lawn?
Yeah, and that does get tricky.
Yeah, for the singles, for us, I mean, we've always said, this is your home.
It's your house.
So
and they treat it like their house.
Right, you need to take care of the lawn. You will actually get written up by the township if you don't mow your yard, right? So you need to do that. Things like taking care of the HVAC systems, we've always made sure that we maintain them, because if they're not doing it, right, we risk that breaking early or not getting that useful life out of that HVAC solution. And of course we do maintenance. We try and do maintenance reviews on our homes twice a year. So like in the spring and then in the fall, we'll do a home review.
Okay.
Just because we're home inspectors too.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah, because it's difficult, like as you're living in the home, a lot of things you don't notice, whether we're owning our homes or whether we're renting our homes, the little things you don't always pay attention to.
Oh yeah.
So we always like to do a full home review of just making sure like no one's missing the little things that all of a sudden you've got a leak coming through your ceiling and your tenant's calling you at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what we're trying to prevent.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I listened to one of your last interviews, and they were talking about like showing tenants like where the water shutoff is, and I'm thinking, and I'm literally, it was like, that's so brilliant, because wouldn't you rather do that like at 10 a.m. on a Friday than 10 p.m. on a Sunday? So it's just like taking care of those little things.
And we don't always think about this either. I mean, that whole concept came to us more recently, because while we did do that when we took the tenants into the home for the first time, I never put like a diagram or anything on the door.
Okay.
And we said too, like even as homeowners, I personally do not access the water shutoff valve hardly ever.
Yeah.
And so if I have a situation that is an emergency, the ability for me to remember exactly where the water shutoff valve, like my husband will be like, it's typically on the side of the street where the water, like, so it's the front of the house.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I don't know that. So now we're thinking, okay, we need to make sure that on each door of the basement or the wall of the basement, we're actually putting a laminated diagram of like,
That's
this
brilliant.
is where your water shutoff is, and this is where your fire extinguisher, just like reminders of safety.
Wow.
Again, because when you're in a panicked situation, you often just lose your memory. So that was one thing we talked about, because we had a tenant call us at 10 o'clock at night where she had an issue. They used their hose when the water happened to turn warm and never shut the water back out.
Okay.
And then we had water literally spewing like
oh my word,
into the basement. So she's FaceTiming us like screaming. And I said to my husband, thank goodness we were by our phones.
Oh yeah.
Because if we weren't, and we happened to pack it in early that night or shut our phones down, we would have a huge mess in the morning.
Oh man.
So again,
that's awesome. I mean, the map, I'm going to take that idea. That's so brilliant.
Simple illustrated map.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that we learned recently. Yes. And then the other thing we've been talking a lot about is there's smart technology that's come on the market for some pumps called the Pump Spy.
Okay.
And then the Moen Flow, which attaches to your main water shutoff.
Okay.
The Moen also has an attachment, a separate one for your sump pump too.
Okay.
But it's all Wi-Fi enabled, so it tracks your water usage and identifies an issue immediately.
Wow.
That sends a notification to your phone.
That's wild.
Yes. And some of this, like the Pump Spy, you can buy for $200 and install yourself. We have a DIY video on how to do it.
Okay.
The Moen Flow is slightly more expensive, but the Moen Flow is for any water right throughout your house.
Okay.
It senses how much water you use, and then if there's any change in water consumption, it flags you.
Okay.
You can buy sensors to put on each like sink or plumbing throughout your home.
Okay.
If you want to, it's more expensive.
Yeah.
Or you can just buy the main shutoff that again sends a notification to your phone when something's changed.
Okay.
Because if you have a leaky toilet, it's going to know. It's going to send you a notification that you're consuming more water.
Wow.
The other thing it can do is you can program it so if you have a water issue, it shuts the water off immediately, or you can have it send you a notification, and from your phone you can shut your water off.
That's wild.
Because I just had a tenant who had a water bill 3 times as high
Really?
this past quarter than last year, same period. And I was like, something's wrong. Like you either have a water leak in your home you don't know about, or you just had someone who all of a sudden started loving baths.
Yeah. One or the other.
Something has changed in your home. I'm not sure what it is, but the more you get those sensors throughout the house, the more you're able to pinpoint exactly where you're having issues. And for landlords, water is one of our biggest culprits, at least for us. You know, if there's something wrong or there's someone who calls and says, hey, there's a leak in my ceiling, it's like, well, yeah, the bathtub was leaking. Or,
right.
You know.
Oh, well, even for multi-units, it's even more important because you have someone above you.
Yes.
And so they're going to mess up their unit, and then it's going to affect the person below them.
Then you have 2 people where you're disturbing.
And it's always like with the multi-unit, like if they're in the back apartment, they might have to like go down and around the other side just to get into the building. So yeah. So that's so smart. I was thinking about that earlier when I heard your previous interview. You know, giving instructions on where the shutoff is, but it's like, it's smart.
Yeah, it's low-hanging fruit that can be, you know, save you a big headache.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So I always like to ask, you know, if you could tell your younger self some advice, or tell our investors who are watching this who maybe want to get after their first one but haven't pulled the trigger, what would you suggest? What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that, like, I feel like it's so easy, but people just bring up excuses to take action. And I guess, like, for my younger self, I wish I just said, like, I read a book, it's called Who Not How. So you literally change, instead of saying, how am I going to do this, you say, who's going to do this. You just change the letters in who and how. Because I felt like my biggest problem my first couple deals is I just had all that pressure on me. I didn't have the contractors, I didn't have the systems. So I felt like if I had asked myself, who can do this?
Versus how am I?
Yeah. And so, because I felt those first 2 deals, I wasted a lot of time and energy and money on trying to do things myself. And if I had just given it to someone else, or even just paid a contractor, just someone that I know to come and do it, they would have done it faster. It may have been more expensive, but when you're paying private investors at that point, it's like time is literally money.
Yep.
So that would be one of the biggest things looking back, of knowing, okay, like if I just delegated this, I could go home. You know, it's one of those things, like, you know, in real estate, it's all about trying to buy back your time. And so a lot of those scenarios, I was at these properties working, and I gave myself another job. And it's like, it's just, and sure, like any business owner knows, like at some point in time, like you're gonna have to go do something, or you're gonna have to put out a fire, or, you know, shut off water in an apartment. So it's that balance, but it's also like, you know, I traded one job for another, and it's like, you know, ask myself, like, is this bringing me joy? Is this heavy or is this light? You know, it's another question I try and ask myself, like, am I good at this? Even if I'm not good at it, do I enjoy it? You know, it's one of those, like, you know, if you like it, you can see yourself doing it forever. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it was, you know, looking back, I just wish I delegated better and just asked better questions. Like that was the biggest thing coming into real estate, because I always ask myself, like, how do people buy these houses? How do you do these renovations? And it was always like, always asking the why questions, and always curious, like, well, why is that house like look vacant? And you know, I didn't further the questions of like, how do I find out who owns it?
Right.
Or is it vacant? Or, you know, are they about to lose it for pre-foreclosure or whatever? But I was always curious, like, people always had these overarching of like, you know, you can't find off-market properties in this area. Even if you did, you know, they're already going to be bought by this person or that person, or you're going to, you know, lose it, you know, to other investors. But then it was always like, so even if you bought a property, these overarching, like, you could buy a property in this area, but it won't cash flow. Or you can buy a property in this area, but you won't be able to cash out refinance. Or you're going to be able to buy a property, but you're going to need 20% down. So it's like, I just wanted to like take all those excuses away. So it's like, sure, the first property was like, just kind of like more of like an experiment, just trying to get started. And then since then it was just like, you know, I wanted to buy a property that I could cash out refinance within a year to finance the next property. I wanted to buy a property that, you know, my minimum was like $500 after I paid the mortgage. You know, I had a buddy where it's like, yeah, you can find those deals, you know, in Allentown or Philly, but you can't find them in here. And I'm thinking, then what's the point? Like these overarching like limitations of just like, oh, you can't do that in this area, of just like, I just don't believe that. And so finding them off market and buying them with cash and doing these cash out refinances, it was just like, I just wanted to take all the excuses that most people take to prevent them from taking action. It was so interesting. I was listening to a book the other day. Ryan Holiday, he wrote, first of all, one of his great books was The Obstacle is the Way. The impediment to action and advanced action, what stands in the way becomes the way. That's what I like clung to during the ejectment. Like, this is what I had to overcome. Like, this is the obstacle. And then he wrote a book most recently called Discipline is Destiny. And there's one quote, and I've heard it before, but it just reminded me, where like, if you wanted to do something, and this is why, like, I look back at my life, you know, 4 years ago when I started, it was just like, I set that timer of the 90-day challenge. And I was like, I have to do this in 90 days. And even if I didn't get it done in 90 days, I was further along than when I started. And he talks about in Discipline is Destiny, this concept of like, oh, I'll do that later. Or I can't, you know, I don't have the time right now. I'll buy this property in a year. And then we need to ask yourself is, well, why are you supposing that you're going to have more time in a year? I don't.
Yeah, it's an excuse.
Yeah,
right?
And it's always like, I don't have the money right now. I'm going to buy it in a year. Well, what makes you think you're going to have the money in a year?
Yeah.
So it's like breaking down those barriers of like, I was just telling Josh like earlier, where it's just like I feel like people they look into investing and then they'll hear a story of a water leak or whatever, and then they're like,
they'll be like, I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, and there'll always be like, I don't want to deal with tenants calling me. And I remember there was a quote from Grant Cardone, and his mom was like, you don't want to be a landlord. Your tenants are going to be calling you all the time. And then he's like, good, I want them calling me. That means they're going to be paying me money. So it's like reversing those problems.
Yep.
And I feel like you're just going to have problems regardless. And it's just like, I feel like in real estate, you can hire someone to take care of those problems. And it's just like, again, more of like, who's going to take care of this problem and kind of be more of a conduit. I feel like that, if that is something I could go back, 4 or 5 years ago and say, that is what you need to do, of like, be a conduit.
Yeah.
Because like people pay for problems, like home inspections, there's problems everywhere, but it's like, sure, then you just have to figure out who the buyer or the seller just figures out how to fix it. And there's money in those problems.
Well, and I love going back to the 90-day group, because a lot of folks that I talk to who are struggling with jumping in, I feel like if they had a support group and they were determined, like, I am going to do this in 90 days and I'm going to have a group who's literally going to be pushing me to say, did you do it? Like, where are you at? Like, what's your status? Because we all need encouragement. And
sure, yeah.
A lot of it is just fear. It's fear because you've heard stories. It's fear because you've made up a record in your mind of how you think it's going to go. And it just is crippling you from making those first steps. So I think that's the biggest thing that I always say is just like, okay, like you said, what's your biggest obstacles? What's your biggest fear? And how do you overcome it?
Yeah.
And stop listening to everyone. Like if you're listening to someone who's never been there, done that, or they've just done it once and gave up, then that's probably not the best person to always listen to.
Yeah.
Like, listen to someone who's overcome their first bad experience. I know, like, one of my brother-in-law, who I interviewed as well, his first one was one of the worst experiences you could have, right? And your first one was a really bad experience. Yeah. But that's not, for us, right? We have 11 and you have 15, right? And for both of us, it sounds like we've had a pretty decent ride. We've had some challenges, but overall, you're not going to get that same obstacle every single one you do.
Yeah.
So, and if you're motivated, you're going to get through it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's going to be one of those badges that you can wear. You made it through, your occupied auction.com, and I made it through my, eviction that I didn't want to go through, and just move on.
It's always the boogeyman. It's always like people just make those situations into like crippling. Like I can't, exactly, like people are always like, well, what if my tenants don't pay? And it's like, just Google, what do you do if my tenants don't pay?
Yep.
How do I buy a property with, that has the former owner still living there? And it's like, it tells you right there, it's going to take 90 days minimum for my situation.
Yeah.
And all I had to do was ask that question.
Plus some cash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, yeah.
It always takes some cash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Greases the wheels.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so your advice, join a support group if you need one, right, to get through your first. And then I think your second one I was just thinking about, and I just lost my train of thought here. But like not being afraid to jump in the water. Yeah,
so my mentality, I think I mentioned it earlier, is the ready, fire, aim.
The ready, fire, aim. That's
so it's like a lot of people are, they're okay, ready.
Yeah.
And then they're like fire, and then or ready, aim, fire. That's normally how it is.
Yeah.
And so they kind of like just take their time with it. And Brandon Turner, who did the 90-day challenge that I joined, he talked about like you basically jump out of a plane and you build your parachute on the way down. It's like if you don't build that parachute on the way down, you die. So it's like kind of like putting yourself in those situations. So it's like I put a bid in on this auction property. And it's like I remember distinctly my dad being like, well, how are you going to pay for it? And I'm like, I literally have no idea.
Yeah.
And it's like, when you're put in, honestly, it's like the most terrifying thing when you're put in those situations where you have to take action or you have to like figure out your next step. It's like your back is literally against the wall. Like if I didn't, I lose my earnest deposit, then I'm one step farther away from finding that first property for my daughter. And it's like the doors had opened based off of that first property, buying the other one 2 doors down. I think we made almost $90,000 on the cash out refi for that second one. And that funded so much other endeavors, was able to buy so many other of these properties for the other kids. But I mean, the other thing I was going to recommend kind of going through that list is like education too, like not so much joining a group. There are tons of group here, but I know of so many people that join those groups just to kind of feel good. So they're a part of something, but I feel like the education to not only learn like how to overcome an eviction or how to overcome an ejectment or overcome not having money and all those other things, whatever other excuse you have. I just feel like educating yourself of like how to negotiate and how to buy a property without money, like that education, like it solves so many of the things that paralyze people too. And to me, it's always funny because like landscaping, I just remember literally listening actually to Bigger Pockets, and one of the guys was talking about being a landscaper, how you could basically be replaced by a robot, like these robot people or robot auto mowers, and I'm like thinking, okay, sure,
aren't they like $4,000?
Six, like my friend bought one for $6,000.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to pay $6,000 for the lawnmower, great, go for it.
But then I think he was also talking about like being replaced by a middle school kid with a mower. So it's like, sure, I understand that. So then I was like, how do I go from like a simple landscaper? Then I got a Bluetooth headset, so I'm listening to podcasts and I'm listening to books, Rich Dad Poor Dad, Think and Grow Rich. There's one I listened to recently, The Wealthy Gardener. It was very good. It's like a father-son. And then there's another one, Richest Man in Babylon. So there are all these little tales that they tell about like a father and a son and how to manage money and how to basically go from, it's all mindset, really. Changing your mindset on, taking yourself from where you are to where you want to be. And I just feel like that's the biggest encouragement of like, the thing is like, you join a group, you get educated, you have accountability, but it's like, you still have to like get yourself out of bed and go and do that.
Self-motivate.
So for me, it was always like, having another kid is like, okay, now I'm going to buy another property. And it was so funny because like this is the first time we bought a property before they were even born. And I just feel like this is like the best thing ever because now it's like already done. But now I'm like, okay, now I have my 15 and I want another 15.
Now you're going for your next 15.
And so, and for me, it's like maybe I can buy a 5 unit and just
buy 3 5 units and then you're done.
Yeah. And just and talk about the scaling mentality. But I just feel like, and I talk about this a lot in Think and Grow Rich of like having a clear vision, and it has to like get you up out of bed and get you going and make you blast through all those excuses of not having time or not knowing, like I just talked to a guy the other week and like everything he said, I just wanted to be like, that's like I was trying to be nice to him.
But that's an excuse. That's an excuse.
What other excuses do you have? And it's like literally everything he said, like I know of someone else or myself that have overcome that and then some. And it's like, just, I don't know what it is.
But it's what you said, it's mindset. It's mindset to say like, I know that I'm going to have obstacles, but I'm going to find a way to get around them. And like you said, like be able to blast through. But it all goes back to like, are you motivated? Do you have confidence in yourself? And are you willing to go the extra mile to figure out how to overcome whatever obstacle you're facing? Some people have it, some people don't, right? And I think that goes back to like being an entrepreneur, being a real estate investor. Like, is that a true passion of yours? And if it's not, it's okay.
There's literally a picture multiple pictures, I should say, but there's one in particular when I was trying to go from that first deal to the second deal and trying to like stack them and almost like a snowball. There's a picture of me and my daughter at the closing table, and we're literally holding a key. And I remember trying to get to that point of going to that closing table and like holding that picture before we even took it, holding that picture in my mind.
In your mind, like this is going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then like when we found out we were due with number 6, like literally picturing like a block of pictures, like 2 and 2 and 2 of like each kid in front of their property, and like making that motivate myself.
Right.
Like it was funny. There's one property I bought in East Greenville that I lost money with, and it was the first time I've ever lost money. First time I ever had to sell. Just a horrible situation. It was like a property that after we found out we were pregnant, I wasn't gonna pull the trigger on this property because I didn't want the headache. It was 30 some minutes away, so I lost about 30 grand on that property. And again, people are like terrified of losing money, and it's like, if you're gonna be in real estate long enough, you're gonna lose money.
Yep.
You're gonna evict someone.
Yep.
You're gonna have hard conversations. You're gonna deal with leaks. So I sold that property, and it was like one of the worst days ever because I remember sitting on the couch being depressed, like thinking that I failed my 5th child. That he just turned 1 in February. So I just felt like, wow, this is such a failure. Like, and I didn't want to go through. It was basically like I was going to leave about 100,000 into that property anyway. So I was like, do I lose 30 or do I leave 100 and devote another year of my life fixing that property up? So ironically, I met someone through that whole process and made a connection with him. And I was telling him, I went with him at Chick-fil-A for lunch, and I was telling him what I was doing. And the other thing, aside from like the Ready, Fire, Aim, the one thing I've been doing, it's like, I don't know if you've ever heard the term an asymmetric bet. So if you flip a coin, it's always heads or tails. An asymmetric bet is like, it's not heads or tails. It's like, this property was an asymmetric bet. I was hoping to make 100. I was hoping to have a 3 or 4 unit and cash flow for 30 years or whatever. But it kind of just went the other way. So it's like so it's not like a 50-50. It's like, that was my 5th property. So it was more of like, a 1 out of 10 to me, where it's like, sure, I lost money on that property, but then it also opened up the door. I met this other guy and I bought a 4 unit from him. And it was basically like, I thought of it as like a wholesale fee. Yeah. Like I got this at a discount. He was trying to 1031. And I'm like, I just basically paid a realtor or a wholesaler that 30,000 that I lost. And he has another 30 units that he might be looking to sell down the road. So it was like, people are so, you
got to look at the bright side.
Hell-bent. Yeah. Right. They're so hell-bent on losing money. It's like, maybe don't think of it as losing money. Think of it as like you're spending money to put it somewhere else. And I just happened to lose that. And it's more of like, it wasn't money that I lost. It was like holding costs and different stuff like that, where it's like a paper loss. And again, I looked at it. It was funny. This is back in end of March. I was like, wow, I can make as much money as I want the rest of the year, and I probably can write that off as a loss, because paper, that's the beauty of real estate. Being able to just move losses and money around. So I was like, this was more of an encouragement of like, I bought 5 properties and this is the worst one and it didn't work out. And it's kind of like dealing with an eviction. It's like, if you think about the eviction, every single time you put a tenant in it, it's like,
it could cripple you.
Yeah, it's crippling you. And it's like, to me, it's like, it's a 1 out of 10. You're going to go, it's a cycle. It's like with real estate too, and the market, you're going to go through crashes, you're going to go through booms. The money that I spent holding the other properties in 2020, basically those properties, their appraised value went up because of the market at that time.
That's it for us. I mean, every mistake we've made, or maybe a bad decision, or it was a worse decision, we've always learned from. So I'm like, we've never been taken down from I wish we wouldn't have done this. It's like, yes, I wish we wouldn't have done this, or I wish we would have done this better. And yes, we lost money from that. But in the end, it's not crippling us. Like, it's not taking us down. And at some point, I think just being a real estate investor, you're going to decide, you know what, this property just isn't the right property for me anymore. So I would imagine, like, in our lifetime, we're going to make some decisions where we may want to do more multi-units and start to sell singles, or we may want to be more in one town specifically. So I just think there's always change that can happen, and just always looking at, like, okay, what did I learn from this situation, and make sure that you have a mindset where you're like, okay, here's my process and I'm going to change it because this is what happened and I don't want that to occur again. And then, you know, sharing lessons. Like, I love to be like, so what shouldn't we do? Like, because we've been there, done that, and I wish I did it different. And we had actually our one from auction.com. In retrospect, we wish we had just plowed the whole darn house done.
Really?
Oh yeah, we do. I mean, we put so much time into that. And now when we look at, like, okay, what did it appraise for, and what are we getting a rent for? And with some of, like, the modular homes now, you know, you can put up a home for pretty inexpensive.
Oh yeah.
And so we said in retrospect, we probably should have done that. But here we are. So that was, like, our probably biggest lesson, where we spent 6+ solid months working on a home that in retrospect we're like, we maybe should have just plowed it over.
Hindsight.
But it's all good, you know. It's still like, it's still a home. It's still being rented. We're still in a good position with value on the home. So
yeah, and I felt with your situation, probably if you choose to keep that forever, real estate's very forgiving. So, you know, just let it cash flow forever.
Right.
My issue, the one that I sold, the moment I sold it, it's like I can't depreciate it. I can't do this and I can't do that, or I can't hold out for 30 years to make that money back. It was like, just killed it.
I know, but look at everything that came out of it too, though.
Oh, it's amazing.
So
yeah,
that's what I'm like. There's always, if you see, I think mentally can see the positives from these challenging situations, then it's all good. Like, live and learn. Yeah,
and for me, it's always been like, I kind of made a promise to myself of, like, not making the same mistake twice. And so that was always like, okay, like, this is a learning situation, and just, like, trying not to make sure that I never make that, like, and just make that promise to myself.
Well, this has been great. It's been so interesting chatting with you and getting to know you more. So, and I appreciate the nuggets. We're going to have to put these books, a lot of good book titles that you recommended during our interview. So we should have that in the notes below, so anyone who's following can check them out. Thanks again, Seth, for joining us, and we're just going to take a minute so you can plug your businesses.
So I'm with Atlas Holding Group. I also go by Value Add Dad, and so I do real estate investing and apartment investing in the area, but I also take care of my wife's wedding venue. We run it with her parents. It's called Historic Stonebrook Farm. You can find us on Instagram and online at Historic Stonebrook Farm. They have a beautiful farmhouse and farm venue there. So with Value Add Dad, I just like to add value to people in the area. I like to purchase properties at a fair price, and also turn them into rentals, and to provide housing for people in this area as well.
And with that, this concludes our Investor Spotlight. So once again, Janice and Seth, it was great to be here with you today, and we'll be in touch soon. Take care.
As always, like and subscribe. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you get our latest videos. Just Maintenance is here to help you understand and maintain your largest investment.